Alright, YouTube, it's time to rake my own state's government over the coals. Usually I focus on the federal government or some, wacky tin horn like Erdogan or Maduro overseas. I think that the state of Vermont, though, right now is showing our government is kind of mentally not all there. I think there's some problems. They experience difficulties from time to time. People in our state government right now have regressed back to the maybe we need more gun control argument. We live in a state where there's very little violent crime, honestly. We have actually a fairly high crime rate now in some areas of Vermont, but it's almost entirely drug and property crime. Has nothing to do with like people shooting each other. I think it's because this state is so well armed. If I'm gonna burglarize somebody's home, I'm probably gonna get my head blown off. So some of that's less prevalent. Mostly it's opiate related. Not really pot related, that's been decriminalized, but it's related to opiates. Heroin, pill popping, some crack and meth, more meth than crack, some things like that. I've seen meth heads before. I've seen people who were obviously pilled out before. 10 years ago, I probably never would have seen that. You'd have to go out in the middle of the night into the worst parts of Rutland and linger there for hours before you'd see that happen once. I'm seeing it more and more frequently, sometimes in the middle of the day now. It's surprising how much the city of Rutland really has changed. It's not just the city, it's the surrounding areas. Burlington's been afflicted. Bennington, Barrie certainly. Some of these areas, they're getting more and more desperate because of this. We have a weird situation, therefore, where the state government right now is worried about, maybe we need to pay more money to confiscate people's weapons. We've got dilapidated roads, some of which are only sporadically fixed, which cost a hell of a lot to fix because of the state's price fixing and no-bid contract bullshit. So we've got a weak infrastructure, a dilapidated infrastructure. We've got a high tax rate that prevents any meaningful new jobs from entering our state. At the same time, we've also got a bunch of ridiculous rich people from the south. They move up here and build their McMansions up on our hillsides. You're worried about the environment too. They had an article 2 days ago in WCAX about wastewater from breweries. Might be bad for the environment. It's warm water. It's sort of like the water discharge from nuke plants. It's not actually radioactive, but it is heated. And so they're worried about environmental degradation, like an area downstream would be too hot for fish to live in or something. So they're worried about the wastewater from breweries. At the same time that they're willing to strip back entire ridgelines to build windmills when you could just slap home solar. You could just subsidize home solar on people's roofs, existing structures, leave the mountains alone, have the tourism, have even ecotourism on top of it. But you're too fucking stupid to make such a long-term plan because it involves people's private property, rather than simply building your windmills up on a ridge to chop birds' heads off. Even though solar is now, I believe, already surpassed the efficiency of wind. Doesn't even matter that we're a cold, dark state. If the Germans can do it, if some little buttfuck town in northern Germany can generate much of its power with solar panels, dark and cold and dingy as Germany is, I think that we'll be just fine. Meanwhile, they ignore the drug crisis altogether. They say very little about it. Every few years, they say, we've got an opiate epidemic in Vermont. We've got so many problems. We need to do something about this. And they never do anything. A couple days ago, they announced the temporary closure for, I think, 2 months of one of their main treatment facilities for addicts. Ooh, that's going to be so wonderful. All those people, hopefully, will not relapse. But unfortunately, most of them will. Congrats, state government of Vermont. What a wonderful job you did. You know what we should do in this state? We should simply not have a drug war at all. We should realize that there are constraints to how much of a person's wealth can be spent by the government efficiently, and that we're far in excess of that maximized level of efficiency. We're well beyond any sane tax rate in the state. What are we getting out of it? An anemic addiction treatment program, continuation of the drug war. We send half of our prisoners to fucking Kentucky. We don't even keep them in our state. I think if a person is born and raised in Vermont, they have a right to be jailed in Vermont. Why don't we strip back some of the restrictions on what people can do, have fewer things that we define as crimes? Why don't we focus on the handful of actual murders and the rapes and sexual assaults, stuff like that happens in the state, DUI. Why don't we focus on that rather than worrying about whether somebody just shot up? Could put them in addiction treatment. Wouldn't it be cheaper than sending them to Kentucky? Because we don't have any, even really medium security facilities in this state. We have we have like a state prison. We have a jail here in Rutland. It's like, a low to almost mid-security facility. I've been inside it as part of senior law. Some of the cells there, they're not even really cells. They look more like dorm rooms or something like that. Not exactly where you put axe murderers. We get an actual hardened criminal, we have to send them, halfway across the country just to put them in prison. It's ridiculous. We should be taking responsibility for that ourselves. Why don't we take all the nonviolent drug offenders? I'm not just talking about weed, I'm talking about all the drugs. Get them out of prison, get them into rehab, and use those cells for people who actually deserve to be there. Then we would be paying less. We wouldn't be exporting prisoners, number 2. And probably clean up our streets, number 3. We should probably partner with New Hampshire for this, by the way. They're a state with increasingly a large libertarian minority. If anybody can pass comprehensive scaling back of or abolition of the drug war, it's going to be New Hampshire. We should partner with them on this. The left should love the idea. This state's full of far left hippies. Why aren't you trying to get rid of the drug laws in this state? If the federal government wants to come in and perturb people, we should also tell them to fuck themselves as a state. So should New Hampshire. You don't have any right to legislate on this topic, so go screw yourself. Why don't we do that? Who cares if they sue us? Who gives a fuck? Still be cheaper. Getting dragged through the court system for years by the federal government would still be cheaper than how we're doing things in this state. We have sky-high taxes on property, on income, on sales, on everything else in this state. What do we get out of it? We have a good educational system, and that's about it. We have a great educational system. See, there's one problem with that too, with the educational budget. Most of those people who graduate from really, really good Vermont schools, they get offered positions in other states that actually have jobs because they graduated from Vermont schools. They're the creme de la creme. They're going to get gobbled right up. Some firm in Alabama, we need you. Come on down. Well, you start at $50K, $60K a year. By the way, our state taxes are so buttfuck low, it's not like you can compete in Vermont. That's what happens here. Our state has significant problems. We can't... The government of the state of Vermont, at the same time that it proclaims, we've got crime epidemic, we need more gun control, they also say, there are no problems in Vermont. It's so calm, so peaceful, so wonderful. We need to keep up the status quo on taxes and the drug war and let our roads continue to rot apart. That's crazy talk. And if you think that it's going to change just because Phil Scott happens to have replaced Peter Shumlin, I got some swampland here in Rutland to sell you. It's really, really cheap, only $10,000 an acre. It's not going to do anything. You'll have to fight the Democrats, number 1, and most of them are neolibs, number 2. I find it funny. How are there so many Clintonian-style neoliberals in a state in which the Democratic majority is essentially founded by a bunch of expat hippies from the West Coast decades ago? How did they sell out so badly? To the point where some of the Republicans are more like ruralist, more rustic and more hippie-ish in this state than many of the Democrats. I just don't get it. We got pot-smoking groovy UV. You think that people just smoke pot up there? When I was at UVM, I was dropping acid, taking mushrooms, and doing all sorts of good stuff. I don't do that anymore, but I did at the time. Blatantly illegal. Yeah, I'm glad I never went to prison for doing those things. Thankfully, statute of limitations ran out long ago on those substances that I possessed there at the time. But should people even have to worry about being put in jail? If they're getting behind the wheel of a car, yeah, throw them in jail. That's driving under the influence. That's a bad thing. It could destroy an entire family forever. But they're sitting in their dorm room, they want to take mushrooms. Who gives a fuck? We've got bigger things to worry about in this state. We've got a limited amount of money. We can't raise taxes much higher. Otherwise, there wouldn't be anybody in the damn state. I've got an idea. Why don't we tax people's second homes, their McMansions, at a massively higher level and eliminate the property tax altogether on smaller homes? Something, a plot of land under a couple of acres, total value under, let's say, 200,000 or something like that. Eliminate the property tax altogether. No property tax. We'll simply increase it by 10 times in all these McMansions. Why don't we do that? It's not like they can't afford it. And some of these people, they have hundreds of millions of dollars. They build some fucking shack up in the mountains or some shit like that. Raise the tax on rental properties, condominiums and so forth, above a certain value. Why do we even bother to have a sales tax? Why do we bother to have any taxes? Honestly, we should just abolish them all. It's not like we're getting much out of them, other than a great educational system that results in more than half of the people who graduate here leaving the state anyway. Don't you think I've thought about that? Here, I'm rising up towards now, in income, the upper middle class. I'm doing fine. Now I can afford to pay Vermont's tax rate. But do I really want to, or do I kind of want to save up money and leave the state, which means it's not getting any of my money? Yeah, considering the weather around here, it's tempting. It's tempting to move to a low or no property tax state. It's tempting to move to a place where I can keep the vast majority of what I make. Yeah, since I can work from anywhere, I could move to the Philippines and still do what I'm doing if I wanted to. It's pretty tempting. It's tempting to move back to Texas. It's tempting to move to West Virginia or someplace in the Mid-Atlantic, other than Maryland. Never moved to that shithole. The Carolinas or whatever. It's tempting. It's, yeah. What am I getting out of paying the sky-high tax rate here? The roads are no better. The educational rate is good, but, most of those really smart kids aren't even staying in the state. The drug war continues to rage, and there are more drugs than ever. I'm seeing more and more addiction and more property crime attendant with that addiction. What are we fucking doing in this state? It doesn't make any sense at all. So I think we need to fundamentally overhaul the way we do business in the state of Vermont. We can be green and clean and well educated without taxing people up the asshole, especially if we simply end the war on drugs in our state. We've always taken the lead in Vermont. We took the lead on many issues over time. We abolished slavery before we even became a state. We were the first state to allow gay marriage without the courts being involved. Massachusetts, of course, theirs was by court decision, ours was legislative. We've led the way on many issues. Never had segregation. We never had a lot of the problems that other states have had over time. Why don't we take up that banner once again and move ahead and save a hell of a lot of money? We can cut the tax rate. We can lower the addiction rate. We need to have a little bit of common sense, but we also need to have a heart. People are addicted. They don't need to go to prison. They need rehab. Maybe job training. It'd still be way cheaper than sending them off to Kentucky to go rot in general population there for no reason. They come back. What do you think they're going to do? The first thing they're going to do is look for a fix because the drugs are everywhere. By the time they get out, they'll be even more prevalent if we keep going the way we're going now. And when they're getting shipped down to Kentucky, that bus is going up and down like this because of all the potholes in the roads that they magically can never fix. Yeah, there's the state of Vermont. It's not quite as romantic as some people believe. They come here from out of state. Ooh, how cute, how rural. Look at all the trees and stuff. Yeah, that's great. You're out in nature. That side of Vermont is really nice. You don't really have to pay much for the forests. They sort of take care of themselves. You take out some old dead wood to prevent forest fires once in a while, and it's all good. You don't really have to do that much to manage much of that land. A lot of it's getting on towards old growth forest, honestly, at this point. But most Vermonters don't live in a treehouse. Most of them live in a settled community. It might be rural, but they have a house. They don't live in a hole in the ground. I know that there are intricate rumors that us Vermonters are just literally a bunch of hobbits. We live in the hills and have, 11sies, lunch and afternoon tea, dinner and supper and so forth. That's not quite the way it works. It's a little more normal than that. You go to some little tourist village. Yeah, there's literally a motel called the Shire over in Woodstock, or at least there used to be. It's probably still there. But at the same time, most of us, like Rutland, it's a large town. It's technically a city. It's really just a large town. But it is technically an urban center. And it's got a lot of drugs in it. And it's got shitty roads. And it's got an increase in property crime over time because people are constantly on drugs, because the state government won't give them addiction treatment. It would rather throw them over in Kentucky or somewhere else. Although I think they had to renegotiate that deal. I think we're paying more now, actually, per prisoner. It's thousands and thousands of dollars more than we should be paying. It should be a lot cheaper to treat their addiction. No matter if you have to give them methadone or something, still cheaper, still more effective than putting them in a cell. That's about all. Peace out.